So today we're going to be talking about the new Oracle Supports Rewards program. I'm sure if you've been following Oracle news at all in this last week, you've seen this plastered all over the place. This really is a big deal, but it's not necessarily a big deal for everyone. And that's one of the things I'd like to explore in this video, along with some very specific scenarios involving managed services providers. But before I get into the details, I want to start out with a safe harbor statement. I know you're probably like, I see safe harbor statements every time I see an Oracle presentation, but why am I seeing this on an ERP Suites presentation? Well, the reason is this is a very new program that Oracle has just released, and not all of the details, not all of the specific guidance around more complex scenarios have been published at this point. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is inference and interpretation. So I want to throw that out there that this is my understanding as of today. Details are still emerging, things are going to change. So what is Oracle Support Rewards? Well, at the highest level, it's an incentive program designed to get you to take your workloads that today are running on-premise, or for that matter, maybe even a competitor's cloud, and move those to OCI. And if you do that, for every $1 that you spend at OCI, they'll give you a 25-cent credit against your support costs. Now, there's some specific terms and conditions that you need to be aware of, and we'll get to those in just a little bit. So the topics for consideration. What are we going to talk about today? Well, first of all, what qualifies for the credit? Who qualifies for the credit? Avoiding faulty TCO analysis. So maybe you're working with an MSP and you're doing a TCO. There's some mistakes that you want to make sure that you don't make as part of that. Avoiding misaligned incentives with the MSP. Shifting the risk to the MSP from yourself. And then lastly, doing an assessment. So let's go ahead and jump right into this. So what qualifies for the credit? So as I mentioned before, so for every $1 that you spend at Oracle on OCI, they'll give you a credit of 25 cents against your support bill. Now, what's important to call out is that is your technology support bill, not your application support bill. So if you're talking about things like Oracle database, if you're talking about WebLogic, that's all applicable. So whatever you bought off of the Oracle technology price list, this is what's being covered by this discount program or by this support rewards program. So your Oracle Standard Edition, Enterprise Edition, all the Enterprise Edition options, WebLogic, that's all covered. Now, what's not covered is the application side. So let's say you own JD Edwards and you got a whole bunch of users that are using it. So you got a really large support bill. Does not help you at all with the spend here. Now, there is an open question related to Oracle Tech Foundation. So this is a technology SKU that's on an application price list. So how's Oracle going to handle that? We don't know yet. No guidance has been published. But for purposes of you doing your analysis, I would just assume that it's not going to do anything for you. For PeopleSoft customers, kind of the exact same scenario. Hyperion, same scenario. So EBS is a little bit of a different story. So none of your applications are going to fall under the support rewards program. However, chances are you bought a lot of technology off of that technology price list to support your EBS apps, things like Oracle Enterprise Edition, WebLogic, etc. So for you running EBS, you should definitely take a look at this. This is something that could help you out. So who qualifies for the credit? So the first thing to think about whenever you're working with an MSP is who owns that OCI tenancy. This is something really important to understand up front. So there's really kind of three different ways this can happen. So the first is if the managed services provider owns the tenancy themselves. This would be a scenario where the MSP contracts with Oracle for that, and then they turn around and maybe each customer gets their own compartment within that tenancy. So there's nothing within that scenario from Oracle's standpoint that links you, the customer, to that MSP's tenancy. And therefore, it's very unlikely that you would get those support rewards. The second scenario, and this is much more common with MSPs, is something called buy on behalf of customer. So again, the MSP is contracting directly with Oracle for that tenancy, but it's identified up front, this tenancy is for Acme Corporation. So in that scenario, there is a linkage between you, the customer, and Oracle. Now, does this scenario qualify you for support rewards? It's unknown. So my advice would be go with this last scenario, which is where you, the customer, own the tenancy that yourself. You are contracting directly for Oracle with it. And then the MSP is taking that tenancy and they're using it to provide managed services for you. So very important upfront to understand who owns that tenancy, or you may find yourself in a situation where the Oracle support rewards that you're counting on just don't come. This is something that Oracle published on their blog, and you can see the Oracle support rewards. You actually see this from within the tenancy itself. So make sure you own that tenancy, make sure there is no ambiguity so that there's nothing going to prevent you from getting those rewards. So avoiding faulty TCOs. So there's something called denominator neglect, or sometimes referred to as denominator hacking, that I want to talk about. Now, I was first introduced to this concept by Nobel-winning economist Daniel Kahneman. Now, I'd like to say that this was just a personal chat that me and Danny happened to be having when he enlightened me, but actually this was me reading his book, Thinking Fast and Slow, where I was first introduced to this. And it's a really powerful cognitive bias that we all suffer from. And it's something that you want to always be on the outlook for. So how does this scenario work? So let's take Oracle support rewards. So at the very top, the numerator, which is what we all tend to focus on, is 25 cents in this example. And then the denominator is the $1 of Oracle support costs. So this means that in essence, you're getting a 25% credit, right? I mean, it makes sense to me. It's very simple math. Well, actually, this isn't the case. The numerator, of course, is correct. It's that 25%. But the denominator should be the total amount that you're spending in order to get that credit. And that amount is going to be the $1 of OCI infrastructure plus the 25 cents of Oracle support costs. So now that 25% drops down to 20%. So the way to protect yourself against this is don't think in terms of percentages, think in terms of actual dollars. It's probably the best way to kind of avoid this cognitive bias. Let's walk through a couple of examples. So in this first one, the denominator, which is going to be our total cost, is the 400,000 for the Oracle cloud infrastructure plus 100,000 of Oracle support costs. So we got a total of 500,000 as our denominator. Our numerator is the credit that we would get back is 100,000. So our math, it comes out to 20%. Again, don't use the percentages. Always just focus on the real dollars involved. Let's change that scenario now. So we're going to keep the Oracle cloud infrastructure at 400,000, but the Oracle support cost now instead of 100,000 is 60,000. So the Oracle support rewards is also 60,000 because it can't be greater than the support cost that you had. So now it's dropped that effective credit from 20% down to 13%. So very important that you do the math for your specific scenario up front so that you understand how this plays out versus relying on published heuristics. I saw one MSP that is saying you're going to save anywhere between 35 to 45%. Well, that's kind of crazy without actually knowing the inputs that go into this. So do the math yourself, see where this comes out. Next, I want to talk about avoiding misaligned incentives. So what do I mean by this? Well, today a lot of MSPs, including ERP Suites, offer things as a service. So the idea here is we want to commit to a business outcome. We want to make sure that our incentives and your incentives are aligned. And to do that, we're going to say, for instance, in the context of JD Edwards, you're going to go and run X number of users per month. You're going to get a performance SLA that's going to guarantee that everything's going to be sub-second and it's going to be this fixed amount. So for you, it's great. You know exactly how much you're going to be spending every month. You're getting this performance guarantee. Everything is beautiful. The problem is that model breaks down a little bit when you're talking about Oracle support rewards. And to illustrate that, let me go through this example. So let's say that you need 100 Windows servers, and these servers have 2 vCPUs and 8 gig of RAM. And so your yearly cost for the servers is going to be a little over $1,100 per year per server. So your total OCI infrastructure spend is going to be a little over $15,000. So, this was all everything that was discussed and designed up front. And let's just say, for point of argument, these are WebLogic servers. You go and you've got that 115,000. You do have Oracle technology products, and you've calculated your support rewards at 28,800. So you go through, you've done the TCO analysis, the math makes sense. But now you go to deploy this, and the technical staff looks at what was originally designed, and they're like, you're nuts. Why are you running WebLogic on Windows? We should be running WebLogic on Oracle Enterprise Linux. Not only is it cheaper, it's more secure, it's the first class citizen as far as WebLogic is concerned. It's where the development's happening. The whole multitude of reasons for why this really is the right answer. Well, the thing is, total your price dropped from that $1,100 per unit per year to now you're $336 per year. So the net effect is you're looking at a total OCI spend there of about 33,600 per year. So your Oracle support rewards just dropped from the 28,000 that you were counting on now to just $1,000. So you did this whole TCO analysis earlier, but people completely operating in good faith, trying to do the right thing for you, just screwed over that analysis. And the worst part is because this is as a service, you're not actually getting any of that savings. So very important to make sure that whenever you're working with an MSP and Oracle Support Rewards is going to be part of the equation, that you understand exactly what that support component's going to be, and you find some way to protect yourself. So that brings us to, how do you protect yourself? Well, my suggestion would be just add language like this to your contract with the MSP. MSP represents the total Oracle support rewards for the customer will be whatever that dollar amount that you all mutually figured out, and then list out what the products are, what the quantities were, what the metrics were. And then as long as you're maintaining maintenance on those products, if the rewards that you get back is less than that, make the MSP on the hook for giving you the difference. Whenever you think about on-prem systems, you're always thinking about designing and engineering just in case. So what is the highest level of utilization that this system is going to need? And then basically we're going to build up to that level and probably give it a little bit of headroom, because we can't dynamically spin stuff up, pull stuff down as needed. So what's happening is if you're using support rewards, you're basically taking that on-prem model and you're bringing it to the cloud. So in this scenario, we've got a database server. We're running Oracle Enterprise Edition, and this server has 20 cores in it. And if we're looking at time of day, and give me a second, let me find my laser pointer here. So if we're looking at time of day, we can see that at night, it's running pretty hot. And this is because of overnight batch loads that are running. During the day, though, not really that busy. So this is kind of the scenario where when you're bringing that licensing over, you're bringing it over for this peak usage, not for the average usage, and definitely not for the minimum usage on the system. So that's the on-prem model. So how does that translate in terms of the actual math? So this is a bill of materials in which we're showing the Oracle Enterprise Edition annual maintenance. So we've got the quantity of 20 OCPUs. We're showing a list price of $10,450 per year per core. Now, a note here, this is list price. Chances are you probably aggressively negotiated something with Oracle much lower than this. So plug your actual number in here. How much are you paying for this? And see where this scenario plays out. But using list price, we come up with just about $210,000 per year of Oracle licensing. So the next line is, this is an X7 bare metal dense IO database server. And this is basically part of Oracle's database as a service product. So you're getting the database as a service, but you're bringing your own licensing to it. And so the cost per this, per environment hour is $7. And the number of hours, this is just the average number of hours in a year, 8,766. So that brings us to a cost of just under $62,000 a year for that database as a service. And then lastly is your Oracle support rewards, which is going to be against this 62,000. So basically take 25% of that number, and this is where you come up with the 15,370. So the net effect is you're going to be paying $255,000 a year for this server. So now let's contrast this with a more cloud native model where you've got the ability to scale up and scale down those CPUs as you're needing them and only pay for the licensing when you're actually getting benefit from it. So how that's going to look is, once again, we're going to start with the X7 Dense IO as a platform, NVMe storage, 768 gig of RAM. This thing is amazingly fast. And it's going to have a cost of $6.16 per environment hour. And that's going to be based on the 8,766 hours again. So we're getting $54,000 a year of cost. Now, one thing to note about this comes with 2 OCPUs baked into this package. So your first 2 cores are already there. So now during the day, when you're doing the online transactional processing and you don't need as many cores, we're going to add 4 additional cores to that, bringing you up to a total of 6 cores, and each core has a price of 43 cents per OCPU hour. But instead of having this for the full 8,766 hours, we only need it for 2/3 of that time. So that's that 5786 that we're looking at here. And the math comes out to just under $10,000 a year for that. Now, the really high usage portion of the day, we're going to want another 18 cores that we're adding, which brings us up to a total of 20. But we only need those for less than 3,000 hours per year. So doing the math there, that comes out to just over $22,000. Netting everything out, you're going to be paying about $86,500 a year for this versus taking advantage of support rewards and paying $255,000. Now, this is a toy example. So the performance data before, I made that up in Excel. But it's not an unusual pattern for customers. You know, we see that same pattern time and time again. Also, in this specific scenario, this is a single database server in isolation. Chances are you're going to have a lot of other x86 workloads that are surrounding it. So maybe your OCI number is going to be a lot higher. But the bottom line is you've got to do the math. You need to game out these scenarios and find out which path makes most sense for you. Should you BYOL using Oracle support rewards, or should you go with a more modern approach where you could scale things up, scale things down? So any questions on this? We'd be happy to answer those questions, and we'd love a chance to get to work with you on doing an assessment, gaming out all these options and figuring out what is the right path for your organization.